And there we go. Um, Welcome, Stephen. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thanks, Johnny. I'm excited to be here too. It wasn't that long ago that I was in the shoes of the audience.
Nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was trying to think how best to introduce you. You are the co-founder of Jhourney, which is a Jhana meditation app. I did one of your guys' retreats over the summer and was just extremely impressed by so many aspects. And I think that there's a really interesting overlap between what you guys are teaching, the way you guys are teaching it, and what we're exploring here with nervous system mastery. Um, so perhaps by way of introduction, well, actually, I'd be curious if you guys in the audience, how many of you have heard of the word jhana or are vaguely familiar what a jhana state is? Just raise your physical hand or uh, say in the chat. Some people, okay, so. Okay, great. Yeah, just curious to see what we're working with here. Um, so, Stephen, maybe as a kind of brief introduction, what the heck are the jhanas, and how did you find yourself becoming so obsessed with these altered states?
Yeah, and obsessed is the right word. The so the jhanas are altered states that of profound bliss and peace that you can learn to enter into with a little bit of meditation practice. And the story for me starts about 6 years ago. I was going through a really tough time. I was breaking up with a co-founder and a girlfriend at the same time, two different people. I think I went from two jobs and no jobs in a day. If it was going to hell, it could go to hell, or if it could go to hell, it was going to hell. And so I went to a 10-day silent meditation retreat as a Hail Mary to see if I could find something that would help me navigate a tough time. And things got even worse. I think I had three migraines in 8 days. And just when out of desperation, really, I had to change the technique. And
Mm,
I did so and got lucky. And I stumbled into what was just an obviously altered state, quietly streaming tears of joy and gratitude. Easily the most blissful thing I experienced in over a year in the back of the meditation hall. And I thought, what the heck is this? If this is replicable, this could change everything. This is like my ticket out of my mess. So I did what I thought any engineer would do, and I sat on the edge of my bed for an hour a day to see if I could hack myself back into that state. And ended up doing things like rotating the technique every 7 days, sort of loosely tracking different personal experiments, and slowly but surely figured out how to make that state happen on demand. And
mm,
it was life changing. It was like I think the most we can go into details about what it feels like and
mm,
um, sort of how the all kinds of different things about them. But one of the things that I find most exciting is how you can use altered states to alter traits. And so I would do things like drop into a altered state, a bliss piece of some flavor, and then just go looking for the most difficult psychological thing I could come up with and let the two wash over me. Um, and so the like just diving deep into like the death of a loved one, sort of breaking through to this like ease and acceptance of like grief and love are two sides of the same coin,
mm,
or
mm,
doing something similar with a semi-traumatic breakup were really profound experiences for me. In addition to the fact that it became easy to stay relaxed and focused at work, I think negative affect and neuroticism on psychometric tests plummeted.
mm,
So it was really, in some ways, helping me become the person that I aspired to be, in addition to giving me respite from what was a tough time. So
mm,
that was
mm,
where the obsession began. It wasn't until a couple years later when I discovered the term jhana and realized that a pocket of the meditation universe practiced these states regularly and talked about them regularly. And so then it became a question of, well, if thousands of people know about this, why
mm,
not millions?
mm,
And in many ways, that was when the idea for Jhourney was born. The core idea behind Jhourney, the company, is there's something fundamentally different about meditation than most other skills, and that is because it's invisible and nonverbal, all this guesswork gets like gunks up the feedback loops.
mm,
And so the question is, are there ways in which we can get around the guesswork problem, and in doing so, make them a lot more accessible?
mm. I love that. So I imagine people's curiosity has probably piqued hearing that. One of my favorite definitions of the jhanas, which I think I heard during a retreat, was this idea of like a panic attack, but for joy. Could you briefly speak to like what that means and the importance of the feedback loop between attention and emotion?
Totally. This is one of my probably one of my two favorite ways of talking about the jhanas. And my favorite when talking about folks who've never heard of it before. And the reason it's my favorite is because the idea of a positive feedback loop between attention and emotion is shockingly familiar. Anybody who's experienced anxiety is intimately familiar with how minute 10 into anxious thinking is a whole lot worse than minute one. You can get sweaty palms or a knot in your throat. And
Mhm.
so it turns out that you can effectively start that same sort of positive feedback loop, that spiraling mechanism in a positive direction with a little bit of practice.
Mm, mm. And how is your how has your life changed as a result of consistently practicing jhanas? And I'm thinking of specifically, I remember you sharing a story where I think you were coding at work and you listened to a song that just triggered this jhana state, and you just talked about like tears running down your face as you're at work coding. And I thought that was just like a really poignant image. So could you just like speak to the arc of like how has your life shifted and what are some moments like that that have been present?
Yeah, that's a fun and dramatic story. I don't want to make it out as if like all day, every day, I'm just like spontaneously thrown into some sort of mystical state. But I actually think so, so there's a number of ways in which I think this has been transformative for me. They all sort of actually bucket into nervous system mastery.
Mm,
And the inner my inner landscape and inner world, my inner monologue. I think for a year after I was regularly in the jhanas, the number one thing I probably said in my head was like, "Oh, come here, my dear friend," instead of like
mm, mm,
sort of like turning towards my anxiety or fear or sadness,
mm,
as opposed to subtly resisting it
mm,
in ways that I had done for so long. And so, let me see if I can sort of more thoroughly enumerate them. One, I think, is if you know that you can move yourself into like a profound state of gratitude, like a visceral state of gratitude, the biggest effect in some ways maybe actually be when you're not doing it. In the same way that having a roof overhead or food on the table has a profound effect on the rest of the day, makes it easier to delay gratification or
mm,
be
mhm,
selfless or something like that. I think
mm,
there's an almost like an insurance effect on like maybe what you might call my this is like a again, I don't want to be like overly dramatize it, but something like mood scarcity, like insurance on mood poverty or something like that. Um,
mm,
the other thing is that I think it and the process of learning to sort of spot like pockets of what we like to call mental tension
mhm,
in the system, and then habitually like turn towards embrace
mm,
and we I'd like to say either spot and release, or we like to say it's love and awareness all the way down, or awareness
mm,
and love all the way down. So you have to like learn to spot the tension and turn and find a way to dance with it or to love it.
mm,
These this sort of like has brought on this whole new like EQ dimension in a way. There are
mm,
things that I am familiar with in my own system, and I think I also like see in my wife and in others that where I was just completely like illegible over my head, 6, 7 years ago. And then maybe a couple of the other ways are, um, uh, I think at some level it like improves discernment and decision making. I don't want to make overclaims here, but if you're able to sort of drop into a place and in doing so had to navigate like different tension in your own system, you
mm,
sort of are like there's like new information flows that are on the table. There's knowing that you have some sort of visceral reaction against this particular part of a puzzle or
mm.
a problem becomes a palpable part of the problem solving process. So
Mm.
maybe I'll just name those for now.
Yeah, no, those are great. And the one that really struck me was how I don't know, I think for most of us we're kind of subtly striving or aiming towards certain states or making predictions about things that we think will help us to feel good. And if we have reliable access to just a practice that allows us to feel a kind of 10 out of 10 like MDMA level of joy, then it almost, I think it changes the criteria about which like how we orient our lives in some ways. At least that's been my experience, like briefly kind of touching some of these states and just my sense. Um, so one question that I haven't asked you before that I'm really curious about is if you were to deconstruct the specific skills that you think are necessary to cultivate to access jhana states, what do you think those skills would be? And I feel like this will be a good on-ramp into the parallels between what we're exploring here with nervous system mastery.
Yeah. So the way we talk about it in our curriculum is that we offer what we call a basic technique. And so you actually could put input for your basic technique, like a simple metta meditation or like a loving kindness meditation. You could also, there's lots of ways in which to move into jhana. You could do something like a body scan relaxation with a bit more like emphasis on certain like pleasant feelings and pleasant emotions.
Hmm.
So you take this basic technique, and at first, it's really just a matter of like finding a way to get the basic technique to work for you. And so maybe you end up finding your right visualization or your favorite phrases, and you're just looking for just like the subtlest um, uh, like early signal. And so maybe one of my phrases: "May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be filled with joy and live a life without suffering." And each of those four phrases has a slightly different flavor to it. And if I can like really, if I can feel like at a somatic level, this is all the whole game is played at the level of feeling tones.
Hmm.
Then if I can't quite feel the differences between those four phrases, I'm like, okay, I've got some settling to do. I'm gonna take a little bit more relaxation. I'm gonna settle it. And then once I start to feel a little bit of the differences, I'm like, okay, I've got the sort of Kindle in place. And now it's just from here, we move into the where I think the real game is played, which is we in our curriculum we talk about it being how you relate to an object in your experience versus spotting or changing an object in your experience. So figuring out the right mantras, figuring out which visualization to use or something is really about changing something in your experience. And then the real game is played like, okay, now given this thing in my experience, how do I change how I relate to it? How do I almost like
Hmm.
bring the telescope into focus?
Hmm.
And it's here where we talk a lot about curiosity, enjoyment, and relaxation.
Hmm.
Can you and we almost like to suggest students pretend they don't even know what those words mean. Just assume you have to completely relearn what curiosity is.
Hmm.
You have to completely relearn what relaxation is and completely relearn like what savoring or delighting is. Uh, and for each of these, then the journey becomes, can I like sink into it more, open up to it more, like let it
Hmm.
overwhelm me, uh,
Hmm.
and and play from there.
Mm. Yeah, I think that was what really struck me about my experience with Journey was I've done a lot of meditation retreats before, and generally I'd kind of gone in with this like kind of like achiever mindset, and I was really focusing and like honing my concentration, and I developed a very, I'd say, skilled use of focus and attention, but I really wasn't relaxing. And it was almost the complete opposite with my experience with you guys, where it was like, oh, like I've learned to relax in different contexts, but I'd never applied it to meditation. And it was just I felt like I went 10 times further with 10 times less effort. And that was like, and that obviously, can be applied to life in so many ways. So could you maybe speak to like, and I feel like that is also an epiphany for a lot of people is that like how good it can feel when you just learn to really soften and relax and like notice that subtle tension that's there that you don't
Yeah.
really pay attention to otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. This is it's so tricky, I think, to communicate this particular point in words. It's there. There's I'm reminded of different phrases. One is like uh, wisdom or knowledge can be communicated, but wisdom can't.
Mm,
And there's like some aspect here where it's like you just have to go like run out and experiment or cut your teeth and have the experience where you see that your effort or your expectation is actually subtly creating a tension in the system.
mm,
And it's that tension then that we want to learn to like love and embrace and release.
mm,
We also to sort of hit this point of like the potential need for relearning what relaxation means. We uh, sometimes we like to propose this thought experiment of like imagine that you are top 20% in the world at something. Like you worked hard to get into a good university, you worked hard to get good at your particular job in this particular niche, you've worked really hard for years. Our internal mental habits, which are completely invisible to each one of us, so we have no sense for like what the distribution looks like across the population. But our internal mental habits are almost no doubt a function of our external incentives and constraints. And so
Mm,
if you work hard to get to the top of something, you may have built up habits over decades, over years or decades,
mhm,
to apply a lot of effort into something, and that's yielded you great returns. And in the process, you may have made yourself the bottom 10 percentile of knowing or how to relax.
mhm.
And if that's the case, like you really need to relearn what that word like there's just this isn't about lifting weights. This is about finding buried treasure or or
Mm,
discovery of figuring out what is it that's in my system that I
mm,
might find like a totally novel or brand new way of relating to.
mm.
It's tricky at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very tricky. Um, so I've been thinking about in my kind of turning over in my mind the overlap that I see between the nervous system mastery work and accessing jhanas. And I like went into Canva before this call and I've like made a brief chart that I want to run by you just for your thoughts. But before we go there, what do you see as being the overlap between nervous system mastery and the jhanas, seeing that you've kind of been through this curriculum and you have a sense of the territory?
Yeah. So the there's a few things about nervous system mastery that I think are uh, just carry so much overlap. Uh, Let me see if I can put them into like a package for us. So one is actually on this relaxation point is we something like non-sleep deep rest is I think a terrific way to begin to relate to something like meditation with a tremendous amount of ease and
Hmm.
relaxation. It's like a
Hmm.
meditation where you're basically looking to get yourself to fall asleep, or if not fall asleep, just like be right in that liminal space. I think can do a great number in helping us unlearn habits where we're trying to like stay super razor focused on the breath or something.
Hmm.
Secondly, this broader idea that your your thoughts are a product of your like emotions and physiology
Hmm.
is, I think, somewhat countercultural and
Yep.
so true. It's like,
Yep.
in some ways, it's almost like one of those like capital S secrets, and then it's like something few people like know about or appreciate or fully appreciate, and
Hmm.
yet is deeply valuable and true.
Hmm.
And so the emphasis throughout nervous system mastery on recognizing that you're not going to think your way out of your current like attractor basin wherever you currently find your current mood or your current state. And instead, what you want to do is like act your way into a new way of thinking.
Hmm.
I think so. So
Hmm.
instead of thinking your way into a new way of acting, act your way into a new way of
Hmm.
thinking. I
Hmm.
think is a profound insight. And then third, I think so many of the different techniques that you talk about in your curriculum, from the different sort of like breathing check-ins to like making kind of notes in your environment and help you move into that sort of act your way into a new way of thinking, I think are all great pointers to this broader idea that we talk about a lot of like spotting and releasing mental tension or learning to like fall in love with the feeling that you've been avoiding, which is a popular Joe Hudson line.
Hmm.
And there's a way of like learning to A, spot the tension, but then B, realize that so many of us have these habits of like running from it as opposed to turning towards and embracing it.
Hmm.
And that I think can make all the difference.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And I think the move of having courageous curiosity towards the discomfort and the tension is I think like if I was to distill the entire curriculum into one thing, one move, I think it would be that. Um, so
Love
just for
that.
fun, I want to share this visual that I created that is very half-baked, and as you can probably tell, it's just like a thought that I'm still forming in my mind. But I've basically been thinking about um this kind of spectrum where in any moment we can be either constricted, narrow, disconnected, and these are kind of the reactive states that we talked about in the first part of the curriculum. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there's this open, expansive sense of safety, welcoming, relaxed state. And oh, go away, Canva. Okay. And then this kind of maps onto I had another axis of sympathetic activation versus parasympathetic. So kind of high arousal at the top and then low arousal at the bottom. And then the way that I feel like this maps into jhanas, I'll just go through a few here, is this. And so what I view on the left side of this chart, where we have low presence, high tension, this is the kind of hyper arousal and hypo arousal that we just covered in week one of the curriculum. And this can show up as like a panic attack, frustration, or at the bottom left corner, there's like collapse and shutdown when we're kind of in this contracted state. And then on the other end of the spectrum, and we haven't actually talked about the specific jhanas, but maybe Stephen, you can speak to this a bit as well. But there's for the first four jhanas, my experience of them was they went from kind of high intensity and high energy to progressively calmer and more still and kind of more parasympathetic and also like lower down in the body, which is where the parasympathetic nerve fibers also tend to be. We have more sympathetic activation in our kind of chest space and then more parasympathetic as we go lower down. So this is kind of the way that this is like my mental model for the jhanas. And then I'm not sure if you guys can see here, but there's like the kind of normal day window of tolerance, so to speak. And for many people, the first time that they go into this very expanded kind of low tension space, it can also be challenging. Like I was speaking to someone, a student this morning who has when he kind of comes into that level of safety, his body almost has a panic attack because it feels so new and so scary to be that open. Um, so just curious to hear your thoughts on this, Stephen. Like what about this resonates or what might you shift? And
Yeah.
feel free to tear it apart because I just came up
Yeah.
with it this morning.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna put a pin into the like fear and panic attack sort of thing. But with this graphic overall, this is basically the graphic that appears in the 2013 Haggerty paper out of UC Davis on mapping the jhanas.
Oh wow,
Instead of high
cool.
presence, instead of the tension axis,
Hmm.
it's valence, but it has the
Mm.
same vertical axis.
Oh, interesting.
So your morning musings are consistent with that of uh, um, academics.
Well,
Not
that
that
makes my ego feel great. Thank you.
good. Um, and I also think you did a nice job putting on there that sort of like daily window, like the window of experience,
Mhm,
and that the jhanas, especially those early, like the first time in them, we will get remarks of like, I did not know this was possible.
mm, mhm,
And yet it's familiar. It's like
mm,
these are like I'm reminded of aspects of like certain memories in childhood, or there's certain qualities of this that is familiar, and yet like I didn't know, especially without something like without external stimulus or drugs or something like that.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
This third thing I'll mention, which is interesting, is that your choice of words of I think this openness versus closed
mhm,
is a great pointer. And your choice of words on it being sort of high presence and about contraction, very similar to this like core idea of mental tension that we talk a ton about, contraction, expansion, tension.
mhm,
Um, uh, and for some, I think advanced meditators, they'll go so far as to wonder whether or not valence, basically pleasure or pain, is or pleasure or suffering perhaps,
mhm,
is in fact like a function of this idea of like contraction or expansion or tension and
mhm,
release.
mhm,
Um, and so the psychologists will use this axis a lot of arousal versus valence.
mhm,
And the advanced meditators may use a slightly different axis, but basically the exact point, trying to point at the same thing from their perspective,
mhm.
which is arousal versus tension. And you're right. You're sort of uh, putting your own words on the same idea.
Mm. Yeah, interesting. Um, I have so many questions. I think another piece that I really want to dig into because I think it's very practical as well for people listening is your ethos of experimentation, which is very, I'd say there's so much overlap between how I think about the process of nervous system mastery as well. But I love the way that you guys have almost um, become experts at the feedback loops and the process of designing and running experiments that are designed or geared towards accessing jhana states. So could you maybe speak to a little bit about like how you think about designing experiments, why you think they're so crucial, and then I can speak to a couple of experiments that I ran during the retreat that I found
Uh,
really helpful.
I'd love that. I'd love that. So a couple thoughts. The first is the two thoughts basically break down, I think, to sort of like effectiveness and then what I would call agency.
Mm,
So, um, in a world in which feedback loops are all gunked up with guesswork, you can imagine almost like imagining trying to like hike home in the mountains with but you only have like 10 feet of visibility because the fog's so bad. Like in this world, you are not, you do not want to work hard without working smart. You like it is so much more important to work smart than to work hard. And if you're going to work smart in such a difficult, uncertain environment, you have to be intentional about what machine learning they'll call like explore versus exploit trade-offs.
Mm,
You'll have to know like, okay, I have a little bit of signal over here. Maybe I should invest in going to my favorite restaurant, or should I try a new restaurant? Which of these is going to end up making like the best evening? Which of these is going to be the likely way to take me home? Which of these is going to be help me to discover the fact that these jhanas exist out there in my own nervous system? I just have to find my way to slip into them.
mm,
And so if you are taking like if you're being intentional about your explore exploit trade-offs, if you're attempting to work smart versus work hard, this is much more about looking for buried treasure and sampling and being like, okay, what did I learn from that? Than it is like just get into the gym and make sure you do enough biceps. It's actually nothing. There's no explore at all. It's just there's no
mm,
explore at all.
mm,
It's just like make sure I lift my weights to get stronger. And I think
mm,
a lot of us approach meditation with an assumption that it's really just about lifting weights. As long as I
mm,
burn my attention back to the breath over and over and over again, this like I'll get calmer or this great thing will happen to me.
mm, mhm,
And so one of the reasons I think experimentation is so valuable is because we often like to say it's not like experience that creates expertise. It's experience plus reflection that equals that creates expertise.
mhm,
And so we really just want to use all the tools we can to work smart rather than work hard.
mm,
The second thing on agency is that the most important thing I think in any learning journey is your motivation.
mm,
And motivation is also surprisingly malleable. You get good at, or you get motivated and get interested in the things that you're good at. And so it's a little bit of like a gnarly loop that you have to bootstrap. But finding little micro wins, learning to like really get excited and appreciate yourself because of the like experiment that you ran, or the thing that you tried, rather than really learning about the journey in the long run, or the destination in the long run, and really
mm,
enjoying the journey along the way. I think is another reason why experimentation is so valuable. In some ways, it's like a hack for feeling more motivated, for experiencing more agency. You
mm,
can always be moving the goalpost to be like, this worked yesterday. Why isn't it working today? And instead of being just thrown into despair, instead being like, that's fascinating.
mm,
Like something must have changed. Like
mm,
Sherlock Holmes, like put my Sherlock Holmes hat on, or like the game is on. Like, what
mhm,
is it that I'm going to discover here
mhm,
that's going to sort of teach me something new about myself?
mm.
Those are the two reasons I think we love it.
I love that, and I have more to share on that. But one thing just popped in my mind was you shared this idea of like being jhana blocked that I think was also fascinating, and another really good correlation between NSM and this stuff.
Yeah. Um, this happens to me all the time still. I'll like humming along. Um, uh, what this I feel like this just happened this weekend, the end of last week, and someone will like something will happen. Maybe something will say something, and it'll kind of like I'll miss it. It'll like basically like lodge itself in my subconscious, and then I'll be off center. It'll be hard for me or impossible for me to get into jhanas, and I'll be like, what the heck is going on? And I'll like replay events at a certain, and I'll be like, I think there's something there, and then I'll discover I'm I'm worried about failure. Like I'm just straight up scared that we're gonna fail at work, or like that I have some like unaddressed anger or anxiety about this particular trap that I feel like I'm
Mm,
in a certain social dynamic, or some other dynamic. And this is another reason why we like to say it's spot and release, or it's awareness and love all the way down. They have like two wings of a bird. They have to be of equal size and strength for a flight to take place. Because
mm,
if it happens underneath my radar and I haven't been able to quite like catch it in real time or after the fact, like turn towards and embrace, there can often be some tension in the system that will just throw me off, and jhanas or perhaps other aspects of nervous system ease will
mm,
not be accessible to me.
mm. Yeah, I think one of the reasons I love that example so much was it if one is able to deterministically access the jhanas, then that becomes a kind of daily way to assess, like, is there an emotion that I'm avoiding? Like, is there something in my experience which I haven't felt? In the same way that you might like check your aura score and you get like a whatever 50 out of 100. It's almost it seems like the same, and I love just the practicality of that.
Yeah, totally. And you don't have to have these high flying weird jhana things in order to do something like that. You can have
Mhm.
your other bellwethers.
Mhm.
But I do think that idea of bellwether is quite valuable.
Mm.
My Maybe I'm just particularly slow, but I'm learning the same damn lessons over and over again with my subconscious, and uh, it's a little slippery.
So I think it's just like the spirals, right? Like the hero's journey over and over again. I want to come back to like when you were learning the jhanas, what were some of the experiments that you ran that were kind of high ROI on your time? Can you just give some
Mm,
examples of types of experiments that might be useful for someone who's starting out on this path?
yeah, yeah, that's great. So I'll bucket them into two things. One is almost like um, sort of like changing the conditions in which well, forget the buckets. I'll just give you some examples. Uh, so one is changing the conditions in which I'm starting to meditate. Uh, I found like very quickly it had significant effect. So if I had taken a cold shower, if I had worked out before, if it was at the like beginning of the day versus the end of the day, noticing that like if crazy stuff was going on at work, that would obviously affect my meditation in ways. All of these things I think started to reveal, like there's ways in which I can like just shift my whole like nervous system closer to
Mm.
we'll call them like attractor basins in the state space of the nervous system, the jhanas or something,
Hmm.
before I even get started.
Hmm.
Breath work, I think, would be in this category.
Hmm.
Um,
NSDR as well.
NSDR, yeah, totally. Uh, Another is that the like techniques in which I was using in meditation, I would discover would sort of reveal new things about myself that I'd missed before. So one good example is well, actually, I'll tell you what. The very first experiment that I ran that ended up getting me in jhana was I was last day of this meditation retreat. I had had 3 migraines in 8 days. I was like just totally falling apart. And I thought, okay, look, the problem is I'm doing this body scan meditation as I've been instructed. And what's happening? They tell me that the most important thing is to be neither aversion nor craving. It's supposed to have this mysterious middle ground called equanimity, which at first I thought was numbness, and then I figured out that that's probably not it. But what was happening is I would hit some sort of like searing hot pain in my left knee because I've
Mm.
been sitting for an hour straight,
Hmm.
and I would be averse to it, and then I'd be frustrated with myself for being averse, and then averse to that, and averse to that, and like we spiral out of control. And
Hmm.
so I took a walk, and I was like, okay, look, I'm clearly spiraling downwards in this positive feedback loop. Like maybe if you like reverse the inputs, you can get this thing to spiral in the other direction. So I'm just
Mm.
going to go in there and like and play this a little extreme, but I'm going to go to the other side of the spectrum. So if I encounter some sort of pleasant sensation, I'm going to welcome it like a friend and be like, hey, come with me, come join me. We're going to carry on with the body scan. And if I hit any sort of pain or unpleasantness, I'm just going to hit it with as much like kindness and compassion as I can come up with.
Hmm.
And this ended up starting exactly that positive feedback loop in a especially like at an embodied level. So I'm body scanning and extending this sort of compassion to myself in like this sort of somatic way. This was the first time that I think kickstarted the feedback loop. I kind of missed the core mechanism. So for the months that followed, certainly the weeks that followed, I was doing a lot of carb occulting. I was like, okay, that crazy thing happened when I like it was roughly this time of day, and I was doing this meditation first, and then I switched over to this version, and I like kind of missed that it was really about like spotting and releasing mental tension or like this
Hmm.
version of like recursive self-compassion, so to speak.
Mm.
And so then while doing these body scans, I noticed like, oh, interesting. I think if I have a broader attention, I find it more relaxing.
Mm.
And so now I sort of had this like idea of almost like this shape of attention. So then I started running experiments with the narrowness or the expansiveness of my attention. Um, I also noticed at some point that if I took like 45 minutes to do this very slow body scan, I'd be in an unusually relaxed place. Sometimes I would assist with music. That was sort of another experiment. And then as I was coming back up through the body, it would almost be like I could start to sense some sort of like almost emotional or energetic aspect to the experience that I hadn't noticed before. Before I had just been playing at the level of physical sensations, but now I was playing where it was like this emotional, physical, like energetic, and I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I noticed that they would change depending on where I was focusing in the body.
Hmm.
And I was like, whoa, this is a really interesting link between like attention and emotion that in a new way. It's not about the shape of attention. It's almost about the location of attention and the degree of relaxation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then it was actually in playing with that that I discovered I could sort of get a little bit of like like a move towards excitement by passing my attention coming up through basically the central channel.
Hmm.
And then I would play with that and would slowly grow over like 15 minutes. And then at some point it would take on a life of its own. And that was how I ended up going from probabilistic to deterministic access the first time. And
Hmm.
since there's many other ways to get into Jhanas.
Mm. Yeah, this is there's so much here, and I think there's two things about what you just said that I really want to highlight for people. One is that the way that you're describing your journey with the meditations, I think, is very different to how most people begin meditation practice, at least, where often we're kind of listening to a guided recording and it's very passive. We're almost like consuming the prompts. Whereas what you're describing here is a much more active conversation with your experience and where you're trying something like what was that like and then trying something new, and if something feels like it's opening up new territory, you're like trying it again and then like going further and further. And I think that is a I mean it comes back to agency, I think, which is I think a core piece of this. And I think that's in my sense is that part of the reason you're able to get such great results with getting people into jhanas in such a short space of time is because you're really giving students agency in that way, and you're like empowering them to run these experiments. um the
Totally.
other thing that I wanted to mention is I think there is a danger with kind of the way mindfulness is kind of taught in the West, at least, through things like Vipassana, where this idea of equanimity, which there is there's obviously a beautiful teaching there as well, but I think the risk is that if we stay equanimous and like neutral to a lot of these emotions and sensations, they don't actually get a chance to be seen or to move. And in the long run, I've seen long-term meditators almost become like emotionally neutered, where they're kind of in this very spacious state, but there's actually not that aliveness. And I think the move of like I love your phrase of like come here, my friend, like the move of like loving and welcoming that sensation, like it really invites it into the experience, and that done in the long run creates just much more aliveness, which I think is a like a non-trivial risk for people who go deep down the meditation path if they don't have that quality.
I I am totally with you on that. This is I sort of hesitate to say this because I would hate for someone to sort of interpret this as like a strong stake in the ground or like a like an antagonizing statement. I would be and I continue to have like I think rich conversations with folks who come from a more like modern mindfulness tradition
Hmm.
and put a lot of like really like to use the word equanimity right out of the gate.
Hmm.
In my experience, uh, equanimity is something I like to talk about basically after somebody's experienced the fourth jhana, and not before then. And
Hmm.
the reason is because the way I the way I finally was like, oh, I get it now. I get what like the teaching around equanimity and this
Hmm.
like balancing between craving and aversion is about is because
Hmm.
I've had this palpable experience of a like deep stillness that's like so profound and so healing and so obviously like not my altered state that in this state there
Hmm.
is like you almost need another word and the closest word you can come up for is equanimity, but it's
Hmm.
almost like this feeling I experience this feeling and now everything around the idea of navigating towards equanimity makes sense.
Hmm.
Prior to experiencing that feeling, there's such tendency, I think, to think, okay, I need to have that neutral experience,
Hmm.
and the only way I know how to have that neutral experience is through all these mental habits, which are invisible and impossible to talk about, that I've developed over decades that involve suppressing emotion.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
one of our like multi-time alumni and someone who I consider sort of a friend who's sort of been in this field for a long time talks it about or called it like the sweeping it under the rug effect.
Hmm.
And until there's like really baked in this like no turn towards welcome like a dear lost friend, that's where equanimity is ultimately found. This notion of like not here, not now, um, in its extreme form is actually just sort of perpetuating internal violence.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I kind of revisited my journal notes before this conversation as well, and I wanted to share a few of the prompts that you gave that I think were helpful, not only in the context of jhana meditation, but also like outside of life in day-to-day life. Um, some of the ones that really landed for me were um, both the kind of the come here, my friend, when I notice subtle tension, and this could be, again, I kind of want to give examples outside of a meditation context, but like if I'm drafting an email to someone and I notice some tension in my system, then like that kind of come here, my friend, and like welcoming it, and then exploring like why am I feeling tension around writing this email or whatever the example is. I think that was it. That was a really great one. Um, a really big unlock for me was, and you spoke to this a little bit earlier, but this exploring the how I'm doing it as opposed to the what, and picking up for myself a kind of subtle change agenda, which gets into the work of Steve March and this distinction between self-unfoldment versus self-improvement. And I think there's such a like trap that I feel like almost everyone falls into at some point where they are going into a practice, be it a meditation or something else, with this subtle change agenda of like, I want to be in a different state than the state I'm in right now, and how that orientation towards your experience is the very resistance that keeps you kind of in that place. So could you speak to that in your own experience as well?
Yeah. This is, I think this is a great point, Johnny, and points at a really tricky paradox that I think almost intellectually maybe is a proper paradox, like without a solution. But it
Hmm.
turns out experientially can be navigated, fortunately.
Hmm.
And it is that it turns out that there's tension inside goals and expectations. So if we're in some state right now and we want to change that state, we have like a goal or a hope or an expectation or something about changing that state, and that like carries with it tension, and we're blind to that tension that may literally shape the available states we can move into, including maybe spiraling into frustration, including blocking us from jhana, or other states. And so how do you navigate? How do you get around that? In fact, I think you'll hear a lot of meditation instruction, which is like you can't optimize or you shouldn't optimize meditation, or it should have no like meditation should have no goal. And I think this is getting actually at that paradox, which is but I actually think that's perhaps useful guidance in some ways, but actually not true guidance, because there's always a goal to your meditation, whether it's to get a little bit more calm or to become fully enlightened or anything in between. And so I think then the challenge becomes, how can I become like intimately familiar with what shape even does that mental tension have in my system?
Hmm.
Can I really feel around it? And given that tension is there, this desire to sort of change my state, how can I then do the spot and release, or the become aware and embrace
Hmm.
moves in and around, and maybe even including that tension itself?
Hmm.
Um, at some point, I think you can even sort of almost like cascade or recurse up the hierarchy of goals, or like the hierarchy of tension, to move into a state where you sort of let go of the goal itself. And you'll hear about like the yoga of non-meditation and certain like Mahamudra traditions or something.
Hmm.
There's ways in which I think you can play that game, but it is a tricky one.
Hmm. Totally. Yeah. The other prompt that I wanted to mention was yeah, this one was big for me. It was is everything in my experience something that I would give away to a loved one? And like can I give this state away? And that just like that like broke me at times. It was
I love
like
that.
oh shit, like
Yeah. Yeah.
and it was such I think for me that was a beautiful experiment and pointer to the subtle tension that I wasn't otherwise aware of, that I was just kind of like um what's the word? Almost just like accepting and tolerating, probably. Um,
Yes.
that
It's
was
so easy to tolerate tension in our experience, as opposed to like love or embrace
mhm,
or enjoy.
mhm,
And that's tricky business.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This notion of, oh man, I love that line. And we sort of, some of the guided meditations, especially the live ones, will guide just sort of like spur of the moment, like sort of what we're kind of feeling live. And so
Mhm,
that I think that's actually a line that we haven't repeated
mm,
since your retreat.
mm.
And I'm so glad you named that,
Bring it
because
back. It's a good
so
one.
we might have to bring that one back. Yeah. But there's something in there that I think is something that I think about a lot, which is, it's sort of like, this is okay. I'm going to be a little crude and or like simplistic and overgeneralize, but I kind of buy the idea that like the great secret of mystics everywhere isn't obviously it's not sense pleasure that's like supremely fulfilling. It may not actually even be receiving love that's like so supremely fulfilling. It is in fact loving, like ing with the verb, that is like where real valence or like real fulfillment is found.
Mm,
And in particularly Catholic and I think early Christian traditions, they had this idea of in Greek agape, which translates maybe most closely to self gift. And
mhm,
there's a way in which you can almost relate to everything in your experience as something that like, may I give that away? Instead of like burrowing into it or sort of trying to, or even there's so many different ways you can try to relate to something in your experience. You can sink into it, open up to it, lie down in front of it, surrender in front of it,
mhm,
grow with it, expand with it, go into the middle, like pick your
mhm,
preposition basically.
mhm,
And the one around self gift is something that's really stuck with me for years.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, for me, there's a way in which when I do that move of like giving to an imaginary or my wife or whoever it is, there's a way in which I almost like have to receive it first. And this maybe sounds very abstract, but there's a softening and an opening that happens for me to then give it away. So it feels like receiving and giving at the same time. It's like
Yeah,
it's there's a exchange there.
I love
Um,
that.
and then the other prompt that again I think is just profoundly useful for all areas of life is this: can I do this at 100th of the effort? And I mean, I've thought of that when I'm like coming up with a marketing strategy, or when I'm like about to go into a difficult conversation, or I feel like it's just such a great prompt. Um, what has that prompt unlocked in your experience, and why do you think it's so effective?
Yeah. The reason let's take the second question first. The reason we like that prompt is because it's like a hundredth of the effort. That's radical. Like
Hmm.
this isn't any incremental change. Like you can't just take the edge off here. Like you need a whole different strategy,
Hmm.
completely different paradigm if you're going to get even close to something like a hundredth. We're talking two orders of magnitude. Like that's just so the I think that's a really provocative framing, which is one of the reasons we like it so much. In terms of what it's unlocked for me, um, certainly all kinds of experiences and honestly like re-lessons and or like relearnings. The
Hmm.
number of times I've had to learn the same thing over and over again in
Hmm.
meditation is shocking. But
Hmm.
the like one analogy is I remember playing a little bit with my attention, playing with that prompt, and then thinking like, okay, if this were like a painting on a canvas, and I were how gently could I touch the paintbrush to the canvas and still leave paint on it?
Hmm.
Like is there as opposed to like when I'm what I feel like I'm probably doing right now, which is like hammering everything with my attention.
Hmm.
And that is really useful, I think, in navigating some of these gentler and wide open states.
Hmm.
I also think uh, so. I'm my daughter is 7 weeks old, and so I'm a new father and figuring it's all disoriented, and I'm figuring it out, and um, some days and some hours much more gracefully than others.
Hmm.
And there's an extent to which maybe like if I'm with my daughter without any expectations about how the next 3 hours are going to go. Like the worst was when I thought she was going to go to sleep in 20 minutes, and then 3 hours later, I'm still like trying to like calm her inconsolable crying, and I'm like
Hmm.
voice end, and like I had work to do and all this stuff. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, Whereas if I'm just like, okay, I don't know how this is going to go, but this is time with my daughter, crying or not, it's just this like warm fuzzy time, and there's a lot way less effort in sort of my inner world through that whole experience.
Hmm.
So perhaps that's a recent and concrete way in which you could back into a much happier experience by asking myself, what's 100th of the effort?
Hmm. It sounds like your daughter is becoming a beautiful Jhana teacher, just like leveling up the intensity of your practice.
she's she's been it is shocking how much of the experience is in my own head.
Mm,
The whole thing, right? Like from I'm like tearing up with love to like, oh my God, I'm losing my mind
mhm,
is she's just crying or laughing or um, smiling or like goo-gooing as
Mm.
babies. Like it's all in my own head.
Yeah, beautiful. So I want to open up questions to the group in a moment, but before we go there, I think another thought that I have, maybe for people listening is that let's say let's say these talks of like accessing MDMA like bliss states sounds lovely, but I'm struggling with unable to fall asleep, maybe having panic attacks, feeling anxious, kind of unprocessed emotions to deal with. How do you see a role for playing with jhanas for people who are kind of really struggling in their life right now?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. I loosely think about learning. There's sort of like three strategies to learn the jhanas, and I do think that they all require a meaningful amount of time. And if you're in a spot where you just don't have that time right now, then it's you're you're probably like better off allocating your resources to other things until you think you can invest the time
Hmm.
in this. Much the same way, like if you wanted to run a half marathon or uh, like hit certain like physical fitness goals or read certain books. Like you certainly doable. There's nothing that precludes you from being able to do any of that. And it's going to take some investment. The three strategies that I think make sense are meditating for an hour or more a day, uh, and doing so very intentionally, and maybe like jotting a few notes to yourself afterwards about what you learned, and treat each one as sort of like an exploratory mission into the unknown in which
Hmm.
you're learning about yourself, rather than something that you're doing rote like a chore.
Hmm.
The second strategy is to go on retreats. And so you can carve out a week or 2 weeks and just go do this full time and totally immerse yourself in it. And then you come back and you'll probably develop, maybe you'll access the jhanas or maybe you'll get close. Your sort of ability to do so in a relatively short sit will sort of return back to baseline. Maybe not quite sort of asymptotically, like get not quite all the way there. And then you could just be like, you know what, my day to day is too crazy. I'm just going to do that on another retreat, next year or in 6 months. And then the third approach is a bit of a blend where you say, okay, maybe I'll meditate half an hour here and there, a couple times a week or something. And then twice a month on Saturday, I'm just going to do like 6 hours.
Mm.
And I've seen that work in a couple of cases too. And I think
Hmm.
for each person, you'll sort of have intuition about which one is, I think, ultimately more exciting for you, given your certain constraints.
Hmm.
Um, does that, let me pause there. Does that answer all of your question?
It does. I have a follow-up, but did you want to
Yeah.
add
Okay.
something?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. So the other thing that I guess we didn't mention in the intro is you guys have a pretty impressive like track record of reliably getting people into jhana states. What is the kind of average duration for let's say a beginner meditator from like zero to jhana? Like what is the approximate number of hours, and what have you seen to be the common threads or the commonalities between people that are able to effectively access those jhana states?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. So we, depending on the retreat model, uh, we see about 2/3 of folks get into jhanas as first timers on a week long retreat with us. About 50% of those folks are in jhana in the first like 4 or 5 days. And these are retreats in which people are meditating between 6 and 10 hours a day. So in those kinds of conditions, we'll call it like 50% success after 40 hours of practice,
Hmm.
give or take. Um, I don't know how that translates to if you're taking the other strategies, which is like do the occasional day long on your own or like meditate an hour plus a day on your own. It
Hmm.
could very well be the case that 40 hours is actually just what like half the population needs. It may be that these conditions are change the speed.
Hmm.
In terms of the sort of shared qualities that we see of folks who I think are, we'll call them like fast responders, like quick or reliably in jhana. And one of them is that they just come with a sense of playfulness.
Hmm.
And this is actually surprisingly rare, I think, when it comes to meditation, and when it comes to the particularly like this idea that I need to get somewhere, I need to get to a jhana in meditation. But if you come with this like just sort of endless fascination and delight of like every twist and turn is something that I'm learning about myself,
Mhm.
and there's sort of like a lighthearted sort of cheerfulness in the same way that you can be a lighthearted, cheery novice tennis player, sort of like laughing at your mistakes and occasionally enjoying the fact that your shot goes within the square. That I think is uh, very. That's probably actually the number one thing.
Mm.
There are other things that I think are in the bucket, like folks who are are sort of like doing a good job of making use of their experiments and sort of building on them.
Mhm.
Some folks I feel like have just like a background of doing this, and some maybe less so. And there's maybe a little bit of a ramp up. There's a handful of different places where you can get caught. Like you
Mhm.
can get caught by, I
That
think,
was my
running
next
an
question.
insufficient. Say it again.
That was my next question. Some of the kind of
Ah,
pitfalls. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So, so folks who I think are the biggest one, I think, is we like to say, look, we are not here to teach you the jhanas. We're here to teach you how to learn the jhanas.
Hmm. Hmm.
And at the end of the day, this is a like you're the captain of your own ship, and we're nothing more than like hopefully an earnest and useful set of advisors.
Hmm.
And with so the folks who are out there like running their own experiments, playing around in the sandbox, and they're like we like to say reflect like a scientist or play sorry reflect like a scientist, play like a child.
Mm.
If they're really
That's
embodying
amazing.
that kind of spirit,
Yeah.
then I think some folks walk in and it's just like, oh, it doesn't matter of time. Like I'm not even sure you need me to be here. Like this is you'll be in a great spot.
Yeah.
Uh, there's other sort of specific places people can caught. Sometimes I think a lot of folks have a tendency to bounce around a lot and try all these different meditation techniques because they're looking for some like fireworks to go off. And really, the game is played once you settle on something like just gets a little slight warmth in your chest, like
Hmm.
imagining a puppy or something. Now it's
Hmm.
really about how do I sink into it and open up to it and get curious or enjoy and relax more
Yeah.
than I ever
Yeah.
had before.
Yeah. It's like the explore exploit trade-off again.
Yeah, totally. Um, we have a list of these in our curriculum, and I'm trying to remember them, but those are a couple off the top of my head.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the reflect like a scientist, play like a child. That's fantastic. Um,
There's one thing related to that, which is that it's super easy, and even in this conversation, for us to sort of subtly begin thinking of meditation as like a heady or cognitive activity,
mhm.
because it is something that happens in our head at some level, but it's just not like that. It's like dancing.
Mm.
Like you
Mhm.
can take all the notes in the world, you can study your rear end off, and you can march all day long, and it's just still not quite dancing.
Mhm.
Like and so finding a way to let yourself get lost in the curiosity, the enjoyment, and the relaxation, or the
Mhm.
giving away of your loving kindness, like a virtuoso violinist, like
Mm.
feeling it in your body, the way you're like, is this something that I can receive and give at the same time? Like
Mhm.
losing yourself in the music, that's where the whole game is played.
Totally.
So this notion of dancing, I think, can be useful to remind ourselves that um, at the end of the day, it's not like playing chess with a blindfold. It's it's like dancing.
Yeah, I love that so much. And what comes to mind is we've recently been talking about like polyvagal theory and this idea of like ventral vagal and how that state is very associated with play. And so kind of bringing and I mean I view jhanas as what polyvagal people call ventral as just like ventral dialed up to 10. It's like if you double down on that and like recursive ventral, it's like you find yourself in a jhana state reliably, is my sense at least.
It
Um,
is a fascinating theory. I've wondered something like that myself.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like I've been talking a lot. I'd love to hear some of the questions from you guys in the space. Feel free to raise your virtual hand, and we'll just kind of go through one by one. Paul, looks like you are up first.
Howdy. Hi. Stephen, I was really curious. I saw that you are familiar with Delson Armstrong, and he really champions Bhante Vimala-Ramsi's twin style, which I'm a big fan of. I love the twin style. Helped me get through a hard toxic shame cycle last year. Um, my question is, I'm curious of the type of jhana that you're doing, because Bhante Vimala-Ramsi has the aware jhanas, which are deal with open awareness. And you could even do walking around versus Pa'ak Sayadaw, which has these concentrative jhanas where you go into an amitta, which is like a signal or a light pattern or a sign for people that don't know. And then you are completely absorbed into this jhana space. So I'm curious what type of jhana you guys teach or access.
Yeah, totally. So the short answer is much more in the style of the open aware and in the style taught by the twin community, Burbea, in Brazenton. Although Burbea and Brazenton, it's up in the air the extent to which you would call those, you would practice those in open aware format. Certainly not that which is inspired by like the Palak jhana tradition is inspired actually by like a totally different set of texts, like the Visuddhimagga as opposed to the suttas. So that's
Yeah.
the short answer. My guess is like sort of 30-second additional context on the jhanas and sort of the world today. Here's a story. It took me a long time to piece this together about like why jhanas are somewhat unfamiliar in the landscape today and why there's some confusion about what they mean. Which is the jhanas actually in many ways cut across time and space. So they appear in Hinduism, predate Buddhism. They phenomenologically resemble a lot of states you see in Christian, Sufi, Mormon mysticism, and more. But just from a Buddhist perspective, there's a story you can tell in which you say, okay, early Buddhist texts talk about the jhanas super frequently and seem to talk about them being very accessible even to the lay folks. Then you fast forward about 600 or 700 years. I always get my centuries wrong, so don't quote me on that. And you have another text written, the Visuddhimagga, that will make a specific claim that 1 in a million people will enter the first jhana in their lifetime. It largely seems as if in the intervening period, religion was institutionalized. And so the practice of these jhanas was taken behind the walls of monasteries, and sort of the bar continued to rise. And it was also introduced this idea of a visual nimitta. Then you fast forward another, basically millennia, about another thousand years or so, and there's a democratizing movement that's like, take religion back for the people. You don't need these crazy, intense states that you can only get into if you're like 1 in a million in order to access enlightenment. You can go straight there without the jhanas at all. And you see the emergence of dry insight traditions. This includes Goenka, U Pandita, many of the Vipassana traditions actually that influenced the early OGs out here in the West, like Jack Kornfield, Jan Salzburg, Joe Goldstein, and John Kabat-Zinn. And so now in the West, predominantly, a lot of Vipassana oriented folks will come from this tradition where the jhanas are not something that you would want to invest in. They may even be a bad thing. They may be a distraction to enlightenment. You have this other school, which is Palak and like very intense, highly absorbed, have to have the visual nimitta. And then you have this relatively recent reemergence, like a reinterpretation of the suttas or earlier texts. And this is where you have Burbea and Twam and other traditions. We have taken almost exclusively our inspiration from that third camp.
Gotcha.
So
I don't need to meditate for 10,000 hours to reach a jhana.
No, and the reason
yeah.
why we find ourselves like very secular, don't have a horse in the race on debates around the jhanas or the different traditions, and think the fascinating thing here is you have a community of folks that is basically reporting an ability to have an MDMA-like experience without MDMA on what amounts to historically hundreds, and then it became like dozens of hours of practice. And that's the thing that we think is like, whoa, whatever that is, we can call it whatever we want, jhana or not, but like whatever that is super exciting and where we're investing our efforts.
Thank you.
Sure.
Beautiful. Thank you, Paul. Hey, Trevor.
Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Trevor.
Hey, so I have a quick question. I'm kind of like been very much doing the traditional meditation path, so kind of like 300 hours on Headspace and did a 10-day Vipassana retreat, and I feel very like I've been following these straight tracks in a way. And when you start talking about like this, experimental mindset, I'm like, that sounds hard for me because I just show up and like do the reps. So I'm kind of curious. So two things. One is how I make that shift, but then two, is there a type of meditation that's like very conducive to like build the type of fertile soil if I was going to go do a journey type retreat someday, so that I'm kind of positioning myself for like heading in that type of direction. What do you
Yeah.
suggest?
Yeah. Great question. So the three things actually. One is non-sleep deep rest. We actually had somebody we actually usually tell people don't prepare. Just come up, just come with your excitement. If you want to prepare, like get yourself stoked. Um, uh, but somebody insisted, and so he did an NSDR for an hour a day for the month leading up to the retreat, and like 6 days before he showed up on retreat, had his first jhana. So uh, that's not happening to everybody who does NSDR. But what I think is it's a great pointer there for how just like wonderful that relaxation approach can be. And it's great fun. And it can sort of begin to sort of reassociate the experience of meditation as something that's just wide open and at ease and like relaxing and playful. So nice on the system that's like sleep. The second is a gratitude practice. So actually even writing like a gratitude letter to somebody that you may or may not send every morning can be like a really one of the top evidence-backed interventions in positive psychology. And that can start getting some of those good feels flowing. And then a third, I think, is a loving kindness meditation, of which there's lots of tracks out there that you could find on Headspace or Calm or something.
Okay. And is it bad to have such a structured, like using a Headspace app for a long period of time, or is it neutral, or is it just a slower way to get somewhere? Like I even heard Sam Altman on a podcast talk about how he meditates an hour and has done for 10 years, but it's like completely unstructured. Like he sits and then he just notices. And
Yeah.
curious your thought on that too.
Yeah. It feels way too strong of a word to say it's bad. Like one, like if the whole, like I want to question the whole like evaluation framework of like bad, good, like particularly if it has sort of should language involved. In terms of like whether or not it would put yourself in a spot that would be like conducive to having like a really quick success on Jhourney retreat or elsewhere. I think the question is actually much more personal. Like, what about this experience is going to make it playful and exciting for me? And if the answer is your guided meditations, then like 100% do that. And if the answer is like throw those out the door because you want a clean slate and you're going to color outside the lines and make a beautiful canvas, then go do that.
Cool. Thanks, Stephen. I think I know the answer, and then you just helped me get there.
Often
Great
the case.
questions. Thank you, Trevor. Hey, Christian.
Hi, how are you doing? So you mentioned the Catholic tradition and Christian, and I'm wondering if there's a way to integrate jhana with a more of a spiritual connection with God, rather than like, because I was literally just thinking, what I'd really like to do is spend like an hour a day in my evening in prayer, as opposed to kind of broken up a little bit here and there. And then you come talking about this, and I'm wondering, well, obviously I'm not going to do 2 hours, but is there a way where some of these principles can be kind of integrated so that it's not just, for me, I really enjoy communing with God. And so, is that something that can go along with it, or is it just kind of forcing these things in?
100%. Just go pray like a virtuoso violinist. In fact, like I still, because of my Catholic roots and because I have such a positive association with the word God, I will frequently like blend prayer and meditation, and have been delighted by how complementary the two are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's helpful. Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure.
Beautiful. I just wanted to add in that, like, for me, bringing in like a devotional quality was also like my way to access jhana the first time I experienced it. And so whether it's
That's
to
right.
God, whether it's to whatever you feel like you can muster a very sincere sense of devotion towards, that is like a super highway into jhana in my experience.
I second that. I had discovered probably the first one or two jhanas through these other various meditation methods, and then stumbled on a meditation technique that suggested using a mantra that used the word God. You could replace it with the universe if you wanted to, but I thought God worked great for me. And it was there were three of them, and it was praise God for my life, which was like a kind of above the head, overwhelming, like kind of surrender, rapture experience. Thank God for my body mind, which is more like visceral gratitude, more in the heart space. And then God loves me, and my response to that was just like, God, like what else matters? And it was just like so relaxed. I was like in the floor, and playing with these mantras actually what revealed to me that this wasn't just one altered state. It was in fact inroads on multiple. And so it was almost in a way through prayer that I discovered the first to differentiate between the first three jhanas.
And are you doing that like over an hour time? Like you're going kind of just repeating these mantras, or you're following, I think, the structure, I think I saw on your website, it's like a stages or something.
So back then, and I guess still when I use those, I will just kind of pulse one, and I'll sort of like kind of drop the mantra and sort of watch how it like changes the somatic emotional experience, and then it'll kind of like simmer out, and then I'll sort of drop it again, and yeah, I'll do that for an hour and a half.
Oh,
Sort of just
that
like
sounds
get
good.
lost in the music, sort of thing. Again,
Yeah.
kind of going back to that musician analogy.
Huh. That's awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Christian. Hey there, Etta.
I'm almost embarrassed to speak because I feel like you're the Formula One driver of meditation and I'm still wobbling on a bicycle, so forgive me. I've been trying to meditate for 45 years. I'll give you an idea. And I know trying and meditation really shouldn't be in the same sentence, but I have ADHD. I don't know if that's anything to do with it, but my mind is never quiet and my body is rarely still. I fidget all the time. And I'm so drawn to your journey things. But the idea of doing a 10-hour meditation, I fear that you would evict me after the first 20 minutes for being a disruptive force. So I'm just really intrigued to know, what does that mean, meditating for 10 minutes? Is it sitting still? Do people go and walk off and do what's right for them? I can't begin. It's outside my field of experience.
Yeah. What's something that you have gotten lost in like a flow state before?
Flying. I was a commercial pilot when I was younger, and I think a combination of being responsible for everybody sitting at the back and just loving it.
Yeah.
It was all consuming. That's yes. So
Yeah.
it can be done. Yes.
In some ways, the journey to jhana is figuring out how to relate to your experience in a way that's so naturally like fun and enjoyable that you slip into a flow state. So it's like flying. In so then we'd be like in your case, maybe it's like, what would allow me to like have a flying like experience sitting here with my eyes closed or while I'm walking. You can learn these states walking meditation too. And so getting lost in your when you're doing a walking meditation, it's still very much an internal experience in a way, because maybe you're like dropping, you're like kind of pulsing. It's the same technique basically. And so maybe you're like pulsing the mantra as you're walking to the woods. And so you're in the whole woods and the landscape, and you're welcoming everything in, and you're noticing how the entire experience changes when you pulse your visualization or whatever it is. But I think we have definitely found folks with ADHD have a wonderful time on our retreats, and I don't have a magic answer for you, other than I think the key will probably be in letting yourself return to flying, as opposed to shooting your way into something else.
That's really insightful. Thank you. I can feel the answer, so thank you very much.
Warm to hear
it. Thank you, Etta. Bruno.
I've been trying to figure out what I'm trying to ask here, but what is your take on the jhanas being a sort of I'll be blunt here, a side attraction in trying to reach Rigpa. Now, full disclosure, I'm been into Dzogchen for probably 12, 13 years. Because the Dzogchen cuts right to the core of, well, at least this is what the claim is, right?
Yep.
Cuts right to the core of sitting and meditating and focusing on the breath or on the images or on at some point they say, okay, just okay, at some point you need to just open your awareness, and if the key phrase here, if the causes and conditions, if your karma is there, at some point Rigpa will occur, right? And what's also being taught is that if these altered states appear, they're fine, they're great, phenomenal, knock yourself out, but having them as the goal, and something that was quite interesting to me when this whole meeting started was you said you're addicted to the jhanas, or I apologize if I misunderstood. So trying to shoot for that when actually, well, the goal would be connecting to Rigpa, and basically going into nirvana at the point of death.
Yep.
So okay, I don't know if my question makes sense.
Oh, totally. Makes a lot of sense.
So what you think? Sorry. Go ahead.
And I love this question because you only ever get this question from somebody who's invested a lot of time of their own in exploring aspects of this world. Yeah. So a couple of things. One, just a quick note on like jhanas and addiction. The jhanas are so non-addictive, it's almost a bummer. Like it is about as addictive as laughing so hard you cry with friends or cuddling with a loved one. I actually think they would be more popular, more prominent, if they were a little bit closer, just a splash like scrolling Twitter. But they're not. Like you're more likely to scroll Twitter the next day than you are even if you just had a jhana that blew your face off. In the same way that like if you laugh so hard you cry with friends, it just doesn't have the addictive element. Okay, but back to this point about Rigpa. There's a fascinating dynamic between the moving to the jhanas and then towards cessation. So let me back up for like a 30-second sort of context, which is very crudely speaking. Okay, I like to think of the development of different wisdom traditions as the development of different psychotechnology trees. So you can look at them as a development of like cultural, historical, political phenomena. With the development of like very interesting traditions and religious traditions. You can also look at it as like some of the world's smartest people developing algorithms to make ourselves happier. And I think the development of the sort of tree, the tech tree of psychotechnology that came out of early and later Buddhism has two, especially if you look at like early and later Buddhism, two big branches. One is something like what I might call like the cessation branch, which is like you end up finding nirvana and enlightenment by scaling the jhanas and then dropping into an unconditioned experience in which something about like time, subject, and other disappears. And then there's other branch, which is move into Rigpa, this like wide open, completely like pure, bright, luminous awareness in which everything is emerging, kind of like has these effulgent qualities. And that is where liberation is found. And they'll debate over which one is better and for various ways. And I kind of see it as like debating whether or not SpaceX versus NASA has better rocket ships. Like, no doubt, a valuable debate. And like, we're both talking about super powerful, incredible tech. So that's one thing. The second thing is that I actually think this is super complementary. In fact, in certain, I think, Dzogchen traditions, they would hold the teaching secret until you've spent 10 years playing in spaces like the jhanas. And then using something like the later jhanas as a launch pad to then do Dzogchen inquiry or Mahamudra-like inquiry can be especially potent. My experience is that my experience in the later jhanas has very much informed and accelerated my inquiry in both the cessation direction and the sort of Dzogchen, Trepcho, drop the sticks, wake up right now direction. And so I have sort of a special place in my heart for blending them all together, and also appreciate others who like to stick to their path.
Okay. Thank you.
Beautiful. Something I just want to chime in briefly is I feel like there's an interesting correlation between accessing jhana states and being able to do the type of emotional work that we talk about in NSM. And my sense is that the more that we have like a secure attachment with life and the less kind of trauma that we're carrying, basically, the easier it is for that kind of insight of awakening to occur. And so I feel like there's like an interesting dynamic there as well. And to speak to Stephen's point, I think that the jhanas almost have like an anti-addiction quality, where if we're able to source that deep felt sense of I'm okay and I'm good, then we're less likely to crave addictions from things like Twitter or alcohol or whatever the things are. So I think there's actually like a deep conversation there as well.
That's a great point.
Just my 2 cents. I couldn't help but chime in. But
Yeah.
Thank you for the question, Bruno.
I love that. Actually, Jhonny, just a quick extension on that.
Yeah.
There's, I think Shamil Chandarya is the one who I've seen say this the best online. But there's a model there. I've seen some folks talk about the distinction between awakening and liberation, sort of being two different axes. And awakening is realizing your true nature, and liberation being working through your conditioning or karma, sort of pick your language. And one route is, and they sort of start independent. But if you have like the more awakening you have, the more like liberation you can do, and the more liberated you are, the easier it is to have like profound awakenings. And so this creates like a little bit of there's different paths through this axis, and direct paths, like direct non-dual instructions, will anchor more on that awakening first, which you then use to liberate. Things like Western psychotherapy or more indirect paths that involve like cultivating a certain amount of shamatha or collectedness, arguably are creating more of the like working through the emotional stuff, which then allows you to do more awakening. So
yeah,
sort of
super interesting. I hadn't come across that. Well, I've just noticed the time. I want to respect everyone that has to jump off at 12:30. So firstly, thank you, Stephen. This has been frigging incredible. We've had people ask for the transcripts because I think it's been so densely packed with insights. For listeners who are like, okay, I'm intrigued, where would you recommend be some jumping off points to learn about the jhanas, to learn about what you're doing with Jhourney, and to just kind of keep going down this rabbit hole?
Yeah. So certainly, we would love to see any of you on retreat. We're actually I think we're sold out at the moment, but just this week we're going to announce 2 more online retreats by the end of the year, in November, December, and then we've been in this like startup mode, and so we've been announcing small batches of retreats like 3 months out, but it won't be long before we have like a good solid schedule that it'll be easier for folks to sign up for. So stay tuned for that. On our website, you can sign up at our mailing list, and then that way you'll get notices about retreats. On Twitter, we're at Jhana Tech, and I'm at Stephen_Zerfas, and so you can follow us there. And then in terms of sort of learning more about the jhanas, I think so. The tricky thing is the jhana literature out there right now is just, it's such a convoluted, difficult, and everybody's speaking for their corner of the thing. It took me forever to figure out why there is dry insight versus jhana deep versus jhana light and all this stuff. So it's quite tricky to navigate. If I had to point to 1 or 2 books, I think the number one would probably be Seeing That Freeze, which is what you mentioned in the chat, Jhonny. That though doesn't have great practice descriptions or phenomenological descriptions. So for more practice or phenomenology, I would point to Right Concentration by Lee Brasington, which is, and again, we sort of teach differently than all the above. And then there's another one called Path to Nibbana by David Johnson. That one's a bit more dogmatic, and is very particularly like sort of the twin way is the best way. But I sort of at this point have a habit of taking everything with a grain of salt and triangulating and appreciating the wisdom that is sometimes found beneath the yelling. So if you find yourself drawn to that, that's a good option too.
Beautiful. Well, for everyone listening,
Oh,
may you.
you're muted on my end, Johnny.
Oh, interesting. Am I still
Is that on my
muted?
end? Can others hear him?
Can you guys hear me?
I can.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it's on your side, Stephen. Testing, testing. Bum, ba-dum, bum, bum,
Oh,
bum.
I can hear you now.
Ba-dum,
Sorry.
bum. That's all good. Well, that feels like a great time. I mean, may everyone hear the wisdom beneath the yelling. Beautiful place to end on. We'll create a transcript for everyone listening. We'll also add the resources that have been mentioned in the notes in NSM in the community. Yeah, just want to say a huge thank you, Stephen. And everyone, if you guys would like to unmute and say thank you so much, Stephen, and we'll close with that. So 3, 2, 1. Thank you so much,
Thank you
Stephen.
so much,
Stephen.
Stephen. Stephen.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all. It's been
See you
fun.
guys very
spending
soon.
time with you.
Take care.